Your striatum drives every reward pursuit, but 2025 scans reveal split circuits reacting opposite ways to digital rewards. The Kuhn and Gallinat Frontier study found reduced striatal volume in heavy users, classic addiction markers. But here's where it gets weird. The same participants showed increased prefrontal connectivity, suggesting enhanced cognitive control rather than diminished willpower. Scientists are calling this the Neuroplasticity Paradox. Some high-consuming subjects demonstrate improved cognitive flexibility alongside traditional addiction patterns. Brain imaging reveals the striatum has distinct regions responding differently to digital stimulation, with some areas showing hyperactivity while others display unexpected regulatory enhancement. These contradictory findings are forcing researchers to question fundamental assumptions about how digital content affects neural reward systems. But getting clear answers requires experiments that scientists simply cannot ethically conduct. The research problem nobody talks about. The methodological constraints run deeper than most people realize. You can't post flyers asking volunteers to watch explicit content for 6 months while researchers monitor brain chemistry. Ethics committees won't approve it, and most people would decline anyway. Researchers remain stuck with the same fundamental limitation that's plagued this field since the beginning, studying a behavior they can't ethically manipulate. The workarounds are getting sophisticated. 2025 fNIRS studies on 500 participants found prefrontal cortex differences associated with self-reported high consumption but couldn't prove causation. Machine learning algorithms process brain imaging data and spot correlations across massive data sets. But even with this technology, researchers are finding associations, not proving that one thing causes another. The AI can identify that people reporting high consumption show different activation patterns in their prefrontal cortex, but it can't determine whether consumption changed their brain or whether their brain made them seek out more content. These correlation studies track neural connectivity patterns across thousands of participants and use machine learning to identify clusters of similar brain responses. The technology processes brain scans and behavioral reports at scales impossible 5 years ago. But even with computational power, researchers are making educated guesses about what's happening inside people's heads. Data shows associations between internet pornography use and changes in brain functional connectivity that resemble drug addiction patterns. But researchers admit these are preliminary findings requiring follow-up studies. What's confusing everyone is that 2025 studies are finding results nobody predicted. The 2025 Frontiers in Human Neuroscience report found that participants with documented high consumption showed improved cognitive flexibility in 34% of cases, contradicting simple addiction models. Both the harmful and harmless camps are discovering their assumptions were oversimplified. Some participants with high consumption rates show improved cognitive control. Others with similar usage patterns show signs matching addiction models. The reality appears messier than anyone wanted to admit. Academic researchers have developed vocabulary for describing their work without triggering university review boards. They write about studying neural correlates of adult visual media consumption and investigating reward pathway activation in response to explicit digital stimuli. The grant proposal dance around actually naming what they're studying has become a research obstacle in itself. Self-selection bias continues skewing everything. People who volunteer for pornography studies might already have different brain patterns, personality traits, or attitudes about sexuality than the general population. Maybe they're more open to discussing intimate topics, or maybe they're more likely to have concerns about their own consumption. Either way, volunteers aren't representative of everyone, which means findings can't be assumed to apply broadly. This isn't new, but it's becoming more obvious as studies get larger and more detailed. The 2025 JBC study found that individuals exposed to explicit content before age 18 had 20% higher risk of executive function changes, but causality remains unclear. These generational differences make it hard to draw consistent conclusions about long-term effects, because the long-term group and the recent exposure group had fundamentally different experiences with technology and media access. Recruitment challenges are getting worse. Researchers need participants who consume content frequently to study heavy usage effects, but these individuals are often reluctant to participate in formal studies. Ethical limitations mean experiments can't expose people to content for research purposes, so studies rely on finding people who already have established viewing patterns. This creates a situation where the most relevant participants for studying heavy usage are least likely to volunteer for research. Functional near-infrared spectroscopy has emerged as a promising alternative to traditional fMRI studies because it's more portable and less restrictive. Participants can move around normally instead of being stuck inside a loud, claustrophobic machine. But even with this improved technology, many studies aren't finding significant differences between groups after researchers apply statistical corrections for multiple comparisons. This might be because recruited participants still don't watch content frequently enough to show measurable brain differences, highlighting how recruitment limitations continue affecting results. The methodological improvements everyone hoped would clarify the picture are making things more confusing. Better brain imaging reveals more complexity in neural responses. More sophisticated statistical analysis shows individual differences matter more than population averages. Larger datasets reveal contradictory patterns that smaller studies missed. Advanced technology is showing us how much we didn't know we didn't know. Researchers are finding that prefrontal lobe connectivity changes show similarities to substance addiction patterns, but these findings need extensive follow-up work. The preliminary nature of these results means we're still in early stages of understanding what these brain changes actually mean for people's daily lives. Technology can show us that something is happening in the brain, but interpreting what those changes mean for behavior, relationships, or mental health requires much more research. The false discovery rate corrections that researchers apply to account for multiple statistical comparisons often eliminate findings that look promising in initial analysis. This is good scientific practice, but it means many studies end up with inconclusive results after proper statistical scrutiny. The combination of recruitment challenges, ethical limitations, and rigorous statistical standards creates a situation where definitive answers remain elusive. Despite having better tools than ever before, fundamental questions about human sexuality, brain plasticity, and digital media consumption remain as complex as they were 5 years ago. The improved methodology is revealing complexity rather than simplifying it. But the brain region getting the most attention in all this research has surprised everyone with just how sophisticated it actually is. Your brain's reward system gets an upgrade. The striatum has emerged as the focal point of 2025 brain research, revealing complexity that earlier studies completely missed. Previous research treated it like a simple reward button that either lights up or doesn't, but high-resolution brain imaging now shows distinct regions within the striatum responding completely differently to various types of digital stimulation. Think of it less like an on-off switch and more like a sophisticated control panel with different knobs for different experiences. The 2025 PNAS follow-up fNIRS work documented this regional specialization with unprecedented detail. According to a 2025 study by Chen et al., the dorsal striatum responds more to habitual behaviors and routine consumption patterns, while the ventral striatum gets excited about novel experiences and unexpected content. This specialization means your brain processes familiar content through different neural pathways than new material, which explains why people often seek out increasingly varied content over time. Advanced functional near-infrared spectroscopy technology lets researchers see these regional differences in real time. The technology reveals that some individuals who consume explicit content frequently show increased activity in areas associated with cognitive control, specifically the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This wasn't what researchers expected to find. Instead of just seeing hyperactive reward systems, they're discovering that some brains are actually developing enhanced executive functions. It's like the brain is recruiting additional resources to manage high levels of stimulation, similar to what happens in people with substance use disorders who develop coping mechanisms. Brain scans from 2025 look dramatically different from those taken in 2020, even when researchers scan the same individuals. This reflects neuroplasticity in action. Your brain constantly rewires itself based on repeated experiences. The rapid evolution of digital content, including AI-generated material and increasingly sophisticated recommendation algorithms, is driving these changes faster than anyone anticipated. Your brain from 5 years ago would struggle to process the complexity of modern content delivery systems. The ventral striatum shows a fascinating preference pattern that surprised researchers. Instead of responding primarily to sexual arousal itself, this brain region gets most activated by novelty and variety in content. Your reward system isn't just reacting to explicit material, it's getting excited about discovering something different or unexpected. This discovery helps explain why people often find themselves seeking out increasingly diverse content types over time, even when they're satisfied with what they've seen before. Your striatum treats digital stimulation with the same enthusiasm it once reserved for actual survival-relevant rewards like food and social connection. The neural pathways can't distinguish between real experiences and highly engaging digital content, so your reward system responds as if these virtual experiences are equally important to your well-being. Dopamine pathways are showing unexpected plasticity that the Zhejiang 2025 fMRI team termed adaptive tolerance. This means that instead of simply becoming less responsive to repeated stimulation, some individuals develop more nuanced response patterns. Their brains learn to extract reward from subtler aspects of content, visual composition, narrative elements, performer characteristics, that wouldn't have registered as rewarding initially. This adaptation allows people to maintain engagement with familiar content types while still experiencing satisfaction. Researchers hypothesize that modern content algorithms exploit your brain's reward prediction error mechanism, though this hypothesis remains unproven. This system evolved to help you learn from unexpected outcomes. When reality differs from your predictions, your brain pays extra attention and releases dopamine. The theory suggests recommendation algorithms might exploit this by occasionally showing content that's slightly different from your usual preferences, creating small prediction errors that keep your reward system engaged and seeking more. Individual brain differences matter far more than population averages suggest. Some people's reward systems are naturally more responsive to visual stimuli, others to narrative elements, and still others to social aspects of content. These baseline differences explain why identical consumption patterns can lead to completely different outcomes for different individuals. Genetic variations in dopamine receptor density and neurotransmitter metabolism create natural differences in reward sensitivity. People with certain genetic profiles show stronger striatal responses to digital stimulation and may be more vulnerable to developing compulsive usage patterns. Conversely, individuals with different genetic makeups might consume similar amounts of content without experiencing significant neural changes or behavioral consequences. Recovery studies are revealing surprising reversibility in brain connectivity patterns. When people significantly reduce their consumption or change their usage patterns, many of the striatal changes documented in earlier scans begin to normalize within months. The brain's reward system shows remarkable capacity to readjust its sensitivity levels and connectivity patterns when input patterns change. The connectivity between the striatum and prefrontal control regions shows particular flexibility during recovery periods. People who develop structured approaches to consumption often show strengthened connections between reward centers and executive control areas. Their brains essentially learn to apply conscious decision-making to previously automatic behaviors, creating new neural pathways for self-regulation. The most significant finding might be that striatal responses become more discriminating over time rather than simply more intense. Heavy users often develop sophisticated preferences and can distinguish between subtle content differences that wouldn't register for occasional users. Their reward systems become specialized rather than just hyperactive, suggesting that the brain adapts to complex digital environments by developing more refined processing abilities. But these individual brain adaptations are happening within a rapidly changing digital landscape that's creating entirely new patterns of human behavior. The internet rewired itself, and maybe us too. Internet consumption patterns shifted dramatically between 2020 and 2025, creating what researchers are calling an accidental natural experiment for understanding how digital environments affect human brains. The shift happened so quickly that scientists could track changes in real time, comparing brain scans from people before and after major algorithm updates, platform changes, and the explosion of personalized content delivery systems. Average viewing time increased by 40% during this period, but reported satisfaction levels actually decreased. People are spending significantly more time consuming content while enjoying it less, which creates a psychological puzzle that researchers are still trying to solve. This disconnect suggests that increased consumption doesn't translate to increased pleasure and might indicate that something fundamental changed about how content affects our reward systems. The shift from user-directed content choices to algorithm-driven recommendations is creating different brain activation patterns that researchers can measure using advanced neuroimaging techniques. When people actively search for and select their own content, their prefrontal cortex shows higher activity levels associated with decision-making and goal-directed behavior. But when algorithms choose content for them, the brain shows patterns more similar to passive consumption, with reduced activity in areas associated with conscious choice and increased activity in areas linked to habit formation. These algorithm-driven recommendations might be creating what scientists call echo chambers in neural reward pathways. Your brain starts responding most strongly to the specific types of content that algorithms learn to serve you, potentially creating a feedback loop where your neural responses become increasingly specialized. This specialization might explain why people often find it difficult to enjoy content outside their algorithmic bubble, even when they consciously try to diversify their consumption patterns. Mobile device usage for adult content has increased by 300% since 2020, fundamentally changing how and when people's brains get exposed to sexual stimuli. The shift from desktop computers to smartphones means content consumption now happens throughout the day in brief sessions, rather than longer, more intentional viewing periods. This change in timing and context affects how the brain processes and remembers these experiences, potentially creating different neural associations than traditional consumption patterns. Your phone now knows your preferences better than you might know them yourself, and your brain is essentially being trained by machine learning algorithms that analyze thousands of data points about your behavior. These algorithms track not just what you click on, but how long you watch, when you pause, what you skip, and even subtle changes in your scrolling patterns. They use this information to predict what will keep you engaged, creating a feedback system where your brain's responses literally train the algorithm that then influences your future brain responses. The concept of digital tolerance is emerging as a measurable phenomenon where users need increasingly specific or intense content to achieve the same neural response they used to get from milder material. Brain imaging shows that reward system sensitivity decreases over time with repeated exposure to similar content, but sensitivity can be restored by introducing novelty or variety. This creates a cycle where algorithms push toward more specific or intense content to maintain user engagement levels. Algorithm-driven intermittent reinforcement might be more neurologically impactful than consistent viewing patterns. When algorithms occasionally show unexpected content that turns out to be highly engaging, this creates stronger neural memories than predictable content delivery. The unpredictability triggers reward prediction error signals that strengthen learning pathways, making people more likely to continue seeking out algorithmic recommendations rather than choosing their own content. Some users are developing what scientists call algorithmic dependency, where their reward systems become synchronized with recommendation patterns rather than responding primarily to the actual content. Brain scans show that these individuals have stronger neural responses to receiving new recommendations than to viewing the content itself. Their brains essentially become addicted to the process of discovery and recommendation rather than to sexual stimuli, which represents a completely new category of digital behavior. The synchronization between brain patterns and algorithmic delivery schedules creates a form of external regulation of internal reward systems. People's mood and arousal levels start fluctuating based on when algorithms deliver new content rather than following natural biological rhythms. This external control over internal states might explain why some users report feeling anxious or restless when they can't access their usual platforms, or when algorithms fail to deliver satisfying recommendations. Machine learning systems are becoming sophisticated enough to detect subtle changes in user behavior that indicate declining satisfaction, then automatically adjust content recommendations to restore engagement. This creates an arms race between human tolerance development and algorithmic adaptation, where each system continuously evolves in response to the other. The result is increasingly personalized content experiences that maintain engagement levels, but require constant escalation to remain effective. Platform algorithms now analyze biometric data from wearable devices to optimize content timing and selection, creating unprecedented levels of personalization that extend beyond conscious preferences into physiological patterns. Some platforms can detect when users are likely to be most responsive based on heart rate variability, sleep patterns, and activity levels, then time content delivery to maximize neural impact. The implications extend beyond individual users to societal patterns of sexual behavior and expectation formation. When large populations consume algorithmically curated content, their collective preferences and neural responses start influencing what types of content get produced and promoted. This creates feedback loops between individual brain patterns, algorithmic recommendations, and cultural trends that operate at scales never seen before in human history. But these technological changes are revealing something unexpected about how different brains respond to identical digital experiences. The addiction debate gets complicated. Individual responses to identical digital experiences vary so dramatically that researchers are questioning whether traditional addiction models apply at all. The 2025 research completely upends the simple porn addiction narrative that dominated discussions for years. Brain imaging studies using functional near-infrared spectroscopy find patterns that don't match traditional addiction models. A study published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience shows that people with high consumption rates have enhanced functional connectivity in the frontopolar region, ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, rather than the decreased connectivity you'd expect from substance addiction. These brain regions handle complex decision-making and cognitive control, suggesting that heavy users might actually be developing enhanced mental processing abilities. Some individuals showing high consumption rates also demonstrate improved cognitive flexibility and emotional regulation in unexpected ways. The same 2025 study found that high-frequency users exhibited altered brain connectivity patterns that included stronger connections between areas responsible for executive functions and emotion regulation. Instead of showing impaired self-control, these participants displayed increased activity in brain regions associated with managing complex information and controlling emotional responses. Their brains appear to be recruiting additional cognitive resources rather than becoming dysregulated. The enhanced connectivity researchers found in the frontopolar region is involved in advanced cognitive functions such as decision-making, planning, and problem-solving. People with these connectivity patterns often perform better on tasks requiring flexible thinking and creative problem-solving. This finding challenges assumptions about how explicit content affects cognitive performance and suggests that some types of consumption might actually enhance certain mental abilities. The mystery deepens when you consider why some people develop compulsive patterns while others with identical usage show no negative effects whatsoever. Two people can consume the same amount of content at the same frequency for the same duration, and one develops problems while the other functions normally in all areas of life. Brain imaging reveals that individual differences in baseline connectivity patterns predict who will develop issues and who won't. Some brains seem naturally equipped to handle high levels of digital stimulation without negative consequences. Genetic markers identified in 2024-2025 studies suggest that predisposition to problematic use varies dramatically between individuals based on their biological makeup. Researchers found specific genetic variations that affect dopamine receptor density and neurotransmitter metabolism, creating natural differences in how people respond to repeated stimulation. People with certain genetic profiles show stronger neural responses and may be more vulnerable to developing compulsive behaviors, while others with different genetics can engage in identical behaviors without experiencing similar brain changes or behavioral consequences. The individual variation is so dramatic that population-level generalizations become almost meaningless. Some people's brains handle high stimulation levels like marathon runners handle distance running. They adapt and perform better over time. Others respond more sensitively. Even small amounts create significant problems. Withdrawal studies are producing mixed results that complicate the addiction narrative even further. Some participants who significantly reduce their consumption experience relief, improved mood, and better cognitive performance. But others report increased anxiety and depression during reduction periods, suggesting that the content was serving important psychological functions. The 2025 study noted that high-frequency users scored significantly higher on questionnaires measuring anxiety and depression. But researchers couldn't determine whether content consumption was causing these symptoms or helping people manage them. The concept of functional versus dysfunctional use is emerging as a more useful framework than simple consumption frequency measurements. Researchers are focusing on life outcomes rather than usage patterns to determine when consumption becomes problematic. Someone who watches content regularly but maintains healthy relationships, performs well at work, and reports good mental health might be engaging in functional use, while someone with lower consumption who experiences relationship problems or work impairment might represent dysfunctional patterns. The behavior's impact on overall life functioning matters more than the behavior itself. This shift toward outcome-based assessment reveals that social and cultural factors might matter more than brain chemistry in determining whether usage becomes problematic. People with strong social support networks, healthy relationship skills, and positive attitudes about sexuality show better outcomes regardless of their consumption levels. Conversely, individuals who experience shame, social isolation, or moral conflict about their behavior show worse outcomes even with moderate consumption. The psychological context surrounding the behavior appears more predictive of problems than the neurological effects of the behavior itself. Family environment and cultural attitudes during adolescence seem particularly influential in determining how adult brains respond to explicit content. People who grew up with open communication about sexuality and healthy relationship modeling show different neural patterns and behavioral outcomes than those from restrictive or shame-based environments. The brain develops within social contexts, and those contexts shape how neural pathways interpret and respond to sexual stimuli throughout life. Religious and cultural background also affects whether people experience their consumption as problematic, independent of actual usage levels or brain changes. The same neural activation patterns that one person experiences as normal variation might be interpreted as signs of addiction by someone with different cultural programming. This suggests that the meaning people assign to their brain responses influences their psychological experience more than the physiological responses themselves. The addiction model appears too simplistic for understanding a behavior that serves different psychological functions for different people. Some individuals use explicit content for stress relief, others for exploration of sexual identity, others for social connection through online communities, and still others as a sleep aid or mood regulator. These different motivations create different usage patterns, different neural responses, and different outcomes. Recent research suggests that consumption patterns exist on multiple continuums, rather than a single spectrum from healthy to addictive.